Good evening and welcome to Face to Face for the Newsfirst team. I'm Niresh Eliathambi. Much is expected of Sri Lanka's tourism industry, and indeed it is delivering. It's growing quite steadily. But is it of benefit to everyone around the island, in all the areas, all the provinces, or is it still confined to a few regions of the country? And to discuss this, I have with me Dr. Rohantha Athukorala, who is currently the Vice Chairman of the World Rural Tourism Council. He is also a former Chairman of Sri Lanka Tourism and a former Chairman of the Export Development Board. Good evening and welcome, Rohantha.
Good evening, Naresh, and thank you very much for the invite.
Right. So, Rohantha, what is the situation where rural tourism is concerned globally? Because we know there are tourism hotspots. If you take India, the Taj Mahal, Agra, Mumbai. If you take Singapore, it's all the tourist attractions of Singapore. Then in Malaysia, you have Kuala Lumpur, Georgetown, Genting Highlands, and so on. But what about the rest of each country? How do you take the benefits of tourism to the far corners, the rural areas of any country? And I know that you have studied models of this around the world. So even in Sri Lanka, we have a large number of resort areas, but how do we spread it out to the rest of the country? Because tourism is the one industry which we know will keep growing, barring any untoward events, which hopefully won't happen. So how do we spread the happiness around?
See, Naresh, it's a very interesting development that we see all around the world, and actually this whole concept came to being from China. The headquarters of the World Rural Tourism Council is based in China, and what they saw was that even though the country has been growing at 7-8% in the last 10 years, and the economy is I mean, one of the most powerful nations in the world, they saw that there was almost like 750 million people coming on a daily basis to Beijing. So then they, as usual, typical Chinese thinking for the future, they analyze and then they realize that they need to see as to how to facilitate this development agenda that was now moving away from the urban to the semi-urban and into the rural areas of China. So the brilliance of a typical Chinese far-thinking policymaker was seen when they bid for the Beijing Olympic Games. And normally in Olympic Games, you spend about between 4 to 5 billion to around maybe 12 billion. The UK Olympics costed about 12 billion. Now Chinese Olympics cost 40 billion, which means that even if you add up all the monies and the sponsorship monies that come to a typical game, they're making a colossal loss. And if you go back, every single Olympic Games that countries have staged, they have run into a loss. And if you take the Greek Olympics, in fact, it dented the whole EU GDP, and it went to a recession. That is the cost that it takes for a development of a staging of an Olympics. Now, everybody was wondering why China spent 40 billion. So what they did was that they developed a total railroad system that's going to help to be efficient for the 750 million people who come to Beijing. Then they got the total water and sanitation developed, the arts, which is theater, then the greenery. So and then of course they had the bird's nest and all that kind of universities that were set up, or actually not, it was sports centers, but subsequently turned to a university, and they developed urban and semi-urban to rural Beijing. So
now this is interesting because in most Olympics, to my knowledge, the massive scale of infrastructure that's required, the new stadiums, the number of swimming pools, the tracks, and so on, and accommodation, all of that. Generally, what happens is that after an Olympic Games or the World Games or whatever, you generally tend to leave these unutilized. You might use 1/10 of it for that particular city's residents and the schools, but otherwise everything just falls into decay. So it is actually a colossal loss, as you said. Of course, there's other issue. You get prestige and so on. There's a lot of marketing and revenue to the government and so on, but the infrastructure itself just falls apart afterwards. So what you're saying is that in China they took the opposite approach.
So Niresh, like you very rightly said, normally in every single Olympic Games you make a loss, and most of the infrastructure that is being utilized is not ultimately in the long term, it just gets wasted. So here what they did was that they got 97% of the cranes of the world to be in Beijing doing the total infrastructure development, and subsequently after the games were held, the real strategic reason was brought out, where the Olympics was used to develop the whole infrastructure and to look at the urbanization and the rural economy to be developed around Beijing. So it was a brilliant case study to the world that Olympics is held not only just for the sports and the peace and the friendship, but it's done for the economic development agenda. So now once that was done, the government of China was wondering how are they going to develop rural China. So on that premise only, this whole concept came in, saying how do I take industry, how do I take tourism into the to rural China. So what they did was they drove this whole concept called domestic tourism into looking at different village situations which the urban Chinese is not privy to, and then they developed models, and subsequently only this whole World Rural Tourism Council was formed, and they have models around different parts of China, and then the whole concept started as usual getting into the theoretical domain, where people started developing books, and then these books started going in terms of creating awareness of this concept called rural tourism. So the usual theory is, Naresh, that any tourist, one tourist that comes, 4 jobs are created. So what happens is that they were trying to create these 4 jobs back end to rural China, and
when you say jobs, it is not just the immediate jobs, that is hoteliers and so on, but the back end, the support services that are required for tourism,
like logistics, like hiring, guides, then people who will also get involved in infrastructure development. So this equation exists even in Sri Lanka, the 1:4 ratio. So then this whole concept saying, how do I preserve the authenticity of a particular village, but make sure that the basic hygiene and sanitation is provided for, that can facilitate people to come and experience culture. So then this association was formed, and then of course it became a global story, and now of course some of the most beautiful villages and rural tourism sites are in Europe. And a lot of people now, when you go on these different tours like the Schengen tour and things like that, they don't go and house these people, the visitors in urban. They always go to semi-urban to rural areas, and of course they promote different concepts like ecotourism, agrotourism, and now of course the latest is carbon neutral tourism. So right now there is a project happening in Sri Lanka which is sponsored by the Australian government, where they have taken 2 community-based villages, and they made that whole villages agro-economic zones, and a typical traveler that comes pays in about $250, and once they go back, their whole travel becomes carbon neutral. So we see these kinds of niche segments coming in to play globally, and the good news, Niresh, here is that in 2024 we had the tourism achieving the pre-pandemic levels. So we had about 1.4 billion international travelers in the 2018s, 19s, and in 2024 we have gone back to that level. So tourism has now stabilized, but as you know, there are a lot of challenges taking place as we speak now in the Middle East, and of course.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'd like to ask you okay, as it stands, we have Israel and Iran firing missiles at each other. None of the other countries in the region has been physically affected, but everybody is of course on bins, not just in the Middle East but the whole world. Will this have an immediate impact on tourism? Let's talk about Sri Lankan tourism and also globally.
See,
will it discourage people from traveling?
It will, Niresh. It will. I mean, currently we have about, I think, a 14.7% growth in the first 5 months, and things are looking very positive. We have crossed the 1 billion mark in terms of the revenue that is coming in, and a point to note is that 99% of tourism revenue goes to the private sector. So in that context, like, it's strong. Key markets right now is India, Russia, UK, but then as soon as Middle East gets affected, you have a lot of disruption on the air traffic, and then especially the crash, the Air India crash create a lot of shockwaves around, where people are saying they're cautious of taking long haul travel. So that is there. We'll have to see as to how this story is developing, and see what kind of impact it's going to have. But the latest development we see in the world is that because of the what shall I say, high-tech war that happens, the wars don't last for long. You might have a 2-3 week war which is totally missile based, and electronic targeted fighting that happens. So within 3 weeks your war is over. So
well, I certainly hope so, and I hope it will be over in less than 3 weeks. It's already been far too long, and it seems quite silly, because firing missiles at each other, and here we countries like us were trying to get out of the economic mess that we are in, and then we have all these external issues, and we have to deal with the fallout of that.
Classic example, Niresh, is the war that happened between India and Pakistan. I mean, when the cessation of hostilities happened, and you had one party who had virtually made a film out of the whole war. They said these are the destinations we are looking at, these are the key targets we looked at, this is how we attack them, here are the video footage which tells me that I have done it, and I have done it with the least amount of casualties. So we see this high tech war happening, and we see a repeat of that going to happening right now as we speak between the Israel-Iran war. So I suppose because the duration is going to be limited, what happens is that I think the impact to the tourism will be, hopefully it will not be so large.
Well, you're certainly optimistic, and that's good to see. Now, let's look at Sri Lanka and our tourism industry. Much is expected of it, but has there been sufficient government support for the industry? For example, renovation of hotels, upgrading of transport fleets. Have we, the various duty-free concessions that are required, have we seen any of that, or is it still, not quite enough?
Sinish, I would take a more broader view. I mean, currently the government is under IMF program, so your expenditure is somewhat regulated, if I may call it, and even if you look at your income sources are somewhat kind of standardized, and I think there should be a lot of reforms to drive the income resources. We know that we have to have sweeping results in the export industry. There has to be sweeping results to be done in the tourism industry if we are to really grow by 50-60%, because if you don't grow by 50-60%
in the industry,
in the overall income increasing by 50-60% rather than the current 13-14%, we are sure that we are going to have a economic crisis once again in 2028, a financial crisis, and we might have to go back to the IMF for maybe the 18th time, which IMF has of course very categorically said this is going to be their last time that they're helping us. So but the good news is that they're very happy with the current progress which is there, and of course the question that you ask, what is the implication to the tourism industry, is that there are so many other sectors which government intervention is required, like for example the health. We know about the impending shortage of medicines which we see in all the media as we speak today. Then we have a challenge when it comes to logistics, because if you look at our public transport, our the vehicle stock is old stock that is there, and we know that as soon as the stock gets kind of oldish, the amount of accidents that it has hits you. So we see that happening right now as I speak. So given these challenges together with the education sector reforms that are taking place, the tourism industry is virtually driven by the private sector, and at the end of the day 99% of its income comes to the private sector. So that's the kind of agenda which is going. What is very important to know here happens to be, Naresh, that 70% of our revenue sources are coming from the beach area, because 70% of our properties are in the beach. So that's why we are seen as a beach destination. So now the question is that, like you very rightly said at the start of the program, how do you make it more equitable? How do you make sure that the revenue can start coming in to other parts of the country, like the central area, the north central, the northwestern province, and how you start getting the income to go into those areas is going to actually determine the future course of events. And the data that we got yesterday was a little bit disturbing. I mean, first quarter results have grown by 4.7% or 4.8% GDP growth, of which the service sector has grown only by 2.8%. and 70% of our economy is the service sector, right? And agricultural sector, which has about 30% of the people working, has grown by 0.7%. So it's only the production and industrial sector which has grown by 9.7%. So what it means is that, you know, the tourism sector falls into the service sector, and the service sector growing by just 2.8% means that we have to see what is that cutting edge policies that we have to do to drive the service sector to a growth of 20%. You know, so maybe the digitalization program, maybe, you know, the rural tourism drive of the overall tourism strategy, which is actually one of the first strategies that the current government has put in this year's plan, that they've allocated 100 million to develop 100 villages. And as per the NPP strategy of you know, going to the community and the rural areas, which is the focus, you know, I think this strategy nicely fits in. And how this rural tourism drive takes form is going to have an impact on the future composition of the overall structure of tourism. But I just like to make one point, which is that as we speak, there are 3,000 boutique hotels, which are all like between 6 to 8 rooms, and like there's one property in Dickwell, Naresh, the cost is something like $14,700 a night.
Well, that's good to hear, although I probably won't ever be staying in that one.
It's all booked by, it's owned by an American, and it's booked till the end of the year. So it's niche travel. It's more to do with, you know, special people with special needs can come and stay. It's totally special need friendly. So it's catering to a niche market. But the point is, Naresh, is that these 3,000 boutique hotels are inside the country. They are not essentially in the beach area. So because of that, you know, these are linked to villages. So if we can develop 3,000 villages, and those villages can attract this clientele that goes hiking, that goes, you know, goes into a typical village home and has lunch or dinner, you know, goes to a typical rural schools and gets involved in how people are taught, you know, how they would maybe get involved in agriculture, you know. So that whole experience of agrotourism or experiential tourism can get that top dollar tourist, and that same tourist, the money that you earn goes directly to the villager, because there are no intermediaries, directly to the person who is in that particular typical village home gets the money.
Interesting indeed. I want to ask you a lot more about the niche markets, but first we'll take a short commercial break. I'm in conversation with Dr. Rohantha Athukorala. Don't go away, because we'll be right back.
Far from the city noise, under a mango tree, children turn broken desks into a stage. They sing, they dance, they try. No bright lights, no big crowds, just a small school and big dreams. Change is coming. An open-air stage for the Kattaragama Primary School. Gammetta, for the people, by the people.
We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
ඔබ වයස අවුරුදු 16ට වැඩි නම්
සුවිශේෂී නර්තන රිද්මයන්ගෙන් යුක්ත නම්
ඔබේ හැකියාව රටට පෙන්වීමට හොඳම වේදිකාවයි මේ.
ඔබ සමාජිකයන් 15 අතර කණ්ඩායමක් සමගින් අදම අයදුම් කරන්න.
Sirasa Dancing Star.
නිෂ්පාදක සිරස ඩාන්සිං ස්ටාර් තැපැල් පෙටිය 100 රත්මලාන. WhatsApp 071 799 7788.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I'm with Dr. Rohantha Athukorala, Vice Chairman of the World Rural Tourism Council. Rohantha, I was taking a look at the statistics pages of the SLTDA, the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, and it struck me that we're still counting heads, the number of tourists. And that's what's announced. And even in the media, every month you see, oh, so many tourists came in April, so many in May, we've just reached 1 million, and so on. But that doesn't really mean anything, does it? Because you could have more and more tourists, but the objective is actually to earn more of these tourists. As you said, the boutique hotels draw tourists, upmarket tourists, those who are able to afford, whether it's $1,000 a night or $10,000 a night, whereas the mass market tourists will be spending much less. How do we go after those niche markets, those high spending tourists? What's the marketing strategy? We all know that you have a 500 room hotel, and how do you market it? Through the travel agents, the tour operators, and so on. But how do you market a boutique hotel with 10 rooms which you want to price at $10,000? How do you do that?
See, the overall strategy, Naresh, is in today's day and age, how do you reach to people's different interests? So now, of course, since this whole industry is virtually automated, people can pick up what kind of magazines you have read, what kind of TV programs have you watched, what kind of films have you watched online, and of course what kind of thought processes you have because of all the different kinds of social media tools which are there, be it the Facebooks, or whether it be Instagram or TikToks, or the different other forms of different platforms that you work with. All this data is collected, this data is available. So now the question is that people are using artificial intelligence, and they can zero down on who the people that they need to coming with a meaningful connection. So the ability of reaching specified niche groups is possible because of today's technology development. So about 2 weeks back, we had this whole campaign coming out for wreck tourism, because there are supposed to be 160 of these shipwrecks across the country, which are beautifully placed for us to attract the high-end tourists.
Because wreck diving is an expensive business. You have to be trained and certified, and takes a significant amount of equipment as well.
And also, it's people who drive. I mean, when you really profile these kinds of people, they're people who are driving businesses globally. They like adventure, they like to take challenge, and they are somewhat risk driven. They like risk. So it's that type of group who would maybe coming to these kinds of tourism. So you have niche tourism happening. So they can be reached right now. That is not the problem. But I think the challenge that Sri Lanka has is, how do you make sure that our country is in the choice set of a traveler? If you look at island destinations, when somebody says, I want to go to a tropical island, does Sri Lanka come up in the top 5? So, I mean, we have won all the awards possible, the most island that has to be visited in one's lifetime, solo travel, it's one of the most safest countries, different kinds of accolades we have been winning continuously. The latest one was, I think we are ranked in the top 10 of family travel by different kinds of opinion leader magazines and opinion leader groups. So we are there, but then the question is that we need to have a distinctive imagery. So, and that's something that the industry has been working for the last 15 years, and on the 26th the global campaign is to be launched. And I think when this is launched, something that all of us must support and rally round is that as soon as it's launched, you'll have half of Sri Lanka who will say they love this campaign, and the other half will say I hate this campaign. And it happens all over the world. I mean, I see it when I sit in the World Rural Tourism Council, that in places like Bhutan, Nepal, those are beautiful tourism destinations where like almost 60% of their GDP would come from tourism because of the geographical terrain of those countries. But even when they launch a campaign, you have two different schools of thoughts that come. So what we need to right now understand is that a strategy has been developed, professionals have been involved in that campaign, and now how do you make sure that we take this idea across to the rest of the world in our own circles, because end of the day the circles that we reach would be the niche markets like you mentioned might want to come. So you might have people who are into maybe biking, you might have people who are into only wreck diving, you might have another group of people who are only into looking at villages, living in villages, experiencing typical village life, so likewise you have different types of tourists that would come. And I think what we need to do is, as soon as we become, if the campaign is, I mean, I'm sure the campaign will give us some kind of distinctive unique features of our brand, and if this brand becomes sharper with over the next few years, then the chances are that you will start getting top quality tourists coming in. A classic example was Incredible India. I mean, when it was launched, Niresh, even the policy makers were against it. There was one person who was very influential in the government about 4 years back or 5 years back, who said, let's do it. I like the campaign Incredible India for India. And today, successive governments have come in India. All have tried to say, I'm going to come out with a new campaign and a new face for my country, and they couldn't come out with a new campaign because this campaign always got a top box score which was positive. So how the industry supports and how we become data driven in the work which we do is going to determine how this industry is going to become $8 billion business.
But it's all about brand building, but also about protecting your brand, isn't it, Rohantha? Because now Sri Lanka, our brand name was spoilt. It was sullied because of the war, which lasted almost 3 decades, and then of course we became known as a corrupt, mismanaged nation. And the world saw the petrol queues and huge protests by millions of people, and the crackdown, riot police, tear gas, all of that. So the brand took quite a bashing, and now it's up to everyone, especially those who are in office, to protect this brand, to nurture it, and to build it up.
Yeah, I mean, spot on, Niresh. I mean, when you go to a global forum, I mean, whenever I address a forum and when I'm coming out, the first question they ask is, so your war is over? Then subsequently, the whole story was, what happened tsunami? Tsunami now times. What are the key lessons you learned from the tourism sector for tsunami? So then the basic rhetoric we say is that now we have 1 kilometer, you can't build within the 1 kilometer, and we saw how all the properties got redone because of the tsunami. So the typical Sri Lankan mentality of saying everything is back to normal, we say. But then the next question came was Easter attacks, and everybody says, who did it? So I mean, what answer do you give? After 6 years, we are here trying to find, who did this Easter attack, which nobody can give an answer to. So it's sad. And then, of course, as you very rightly said, you had the petrol skews that are coming. So from a brand point of view, brand Sri Lanka has been battered, and it has been battered is that it's associated with negative storylines and connotations across all the headline stories around the world. So in today they say, no, you don't watch a 30-second TV commercial. They say that today's TV commercials are 3 seconds. Within 1 to 3 seconds you are switched. So today's storylines and newsworthy storylines are also 1 to 3 seconds. So we have been in those 1 to 3 seconds in the wrong places. Absolutely, the touch points has been so memorable, as they call it, tsunami, war, Easter attack, and now you're bankrupt. So 4 touch points when you have continuously that you are associated with, that tells you that you have to start looking at yourself, and asking yourself, we have so much good going, have we told this story to the world? I mean, in the day and age, every country has negative points. I mean, you take for example brand USA, as we speak today. I mean, you have the armed forces are in LA, arresting everybody. And the other day I just saw actually a mother who said that I dropped my kids at school, and who's going to pick them up? And she was just getting arrested. So, but then what happens is that you have all the positive stories that are coming. You might have the Disneylands, you might have the new launches from Apple, you have all the different beautiful stories that hit your main line. So 1 to 3 second stories, positive, negates your negative. Now we have not mastered this art in terms of damage control. So because of that, I hope that after the 26th of June, once the global campaign starts rolling out, and we start having a good campaign, which are not only just the structured campaigns, but coming out with newsworthy stories that can hit the 1 to 3 second share of voice and share of minds of people in our key markets. We don't have to do this across the world. I mean, if you say that our key markets are, you have the Indias and you have the Russias, you have the UKs, you have the France, Italy, you have the Middle Eastern clientele also, which you need to do, because in the future they are our target group. So these are very opportune times when people are confined to the home. How do you communicate and how do you build your brand? So I think that opportunity we have got, and we should not let go. Niresh, if you take for example Estonia, right? You take Croatia. These are also countries battered by the war. It was only negative, but today those brands have put their act together. They have come out with the nation branding campaigns. I mean, let's not use the word nation branding, but they have come out with showing the reality in each of those countries, looking at tourism, people, culture, investment of the top hotels that have come in, sports, and including politicians, where you highlight good governance, and through those things, those brands have become so strong. A country like Croatia is having about a 6 billion euro. You have about a 25 billion exports that are coming in. So these are the countries of Croatia, Estonia. So I think we have success stories in the global template, and I think we need to start taking those lessons out of that, and then making sure that you build a sharp identity for the brand, so that then it will trickle down to the niche markets that you talked about, Niresh, and through that we will start getting tourists who spend not $167 as we do now per day, but we must slowly start moving them up into a maybe $250 kind of situation, which can be done.
But Rohantha, now you spoke of Croatia, which was, part of the former Yugoslavia,
Yeah.
and when it split, there was in fact a very bitter civil war, and finally they got their independence. But since then, they've been very focused in their tourism efforts because they realize that they have a very lengthy coastline with hundreds of islands on the Adriatic Sea, which is absolutely like glass. It's so pure and clean and easy, and the beaches are wonderful. So they focused on this because Europeans in winter they had to go to Italy or the south of France or Spain, and here suddenly this new country opened up. So they identified their USP, their unique selling proposition, and they went after the market. Do we do that very well in Sri Lanka?
See, we have been having so much of internal challenges, like I said,
shooting ourselves in the foot all the time.
Last 4 years has been tough. I mean, you have a situation of where governments have suddenly changed, and then of course you have the pandemic, COVID, and then you had the Easter attacks, and then you had, so when you have these kinds of distractions, sometimes obviously staying focused will be tough. It's a tough challenge. I think brand Sri Lanka has been going through tough times, but at least now there is stability. You have a government which is stable, from a general elections to the presidential elections to the provincial councils, which has now come to a close. An addition has been made, and so I think now you have the central government, you have the provincial governments, you have the overall structures which are in place, and the governance is very strong. And I think now is the time. It has taken maybe 6-7 months, but I think within 7 months we have put one part of the country right, one of the key challenges. So I think now what we have to do is to look at the rest of the challenges that are more to do with income generation, driving the export market, driving the tourism business. We know that there might be a hit on the money that we get from remittances because of the Middle Eastern challenge, right? Currently I think we are doing about 1.8 billion in the first quarter. We were beautifully poised to become, I think, $8 to $9 billion coming in from this year. You're nicely poised, but then now the Middle Eastern will have a slight impact on the remittances, but we must now see as to how to drive exports. If we can make our exports about 25 billion, we were like at about 16.7 billion last year. This year's target is about 19.7 billion or 20 billion. If that is so, if we can make by end of next year, if we can be a 25 billion business, if the tourism industry can hit 4 to 5 billion this year, and maybe by next year if we can be a little bit more aggressive and hit a $7 billion, I think the 25 plus 7 takes us to about 32, and if you get about 8 billion from our remittances, we got a $40 billion coming into the country, and then your import bill will pick up. I mean, it was at about 17-18 billion last year, so even if it becomes 25-27, we are having positive cash flow, and that money is going to help us in terms of buffering 2028, because from 2028 onwards we start paying our loans. So I think the country, like the question you asked, have we got battered and have we lost focus? Yes, we did, but there were 67 other countries just like that. As we speak, there are 67 countries that are going through a financial crisis, so including some of our neighbors. So at least we are now out of that, and there's a proper pathway and a roadmap that is there. I think now we need to start asking ourselves how we are going to drive that roadmap in the next 3 years, so that at least next 3 years we should be focused, is what I am saying.
Now, Rohantha, what type of tourist do we really want? Now, if you look at the Maldives, they get a lot of honeymooners, Japanese, Koreans, and so on. If you look at the Caribbean, you have the fun-loving youngsters. Spain, Ibiza, same thing. And then you have, of course, if you look at Greece, you have people who come to enjoy the culture and so on. Here in Sri Lanka, we've got a little bit of everything. For a long time, we had a lot of retired Westerners who would come here and just, wouldn't spend a lot of money because, of course, they are retirees. But now that profile has changed. But what should we be targeting? Because we need to, rather than waiting for various types of tourists to turn up, we need to actually target the particular types of tourism. Perhaps not one type, but those that we want to bring here and who would be most beneficial to the industry.
See, it's a tough question. Why? Because I also had a AI company. We do brand mapping. So what we did was we looked at about 16,000 reviews from different platforms. We scooped it out, and then we used a algorithm called the Kano model, and from that we analyze and see what the trending reasons as to why people come. We do this across different countries. Now, when it was done in Sri Lanka, what we realized was the number one reason why people come to Sri Lanka is culture. So even if they are staying in a beach destination, if you look at the kinds of discussions that they have been having on different social platforms, it was totally directed towards culture. So now these are consumer insight. It's a consumer insight that has not come because somebody has not gone and asked why. See, like you very rightly said, Niresh, we are just focusing on people coming in, and everybody talks saying we have hit 1 million tourists, we are going to hit 2 million by June, we are going to hit 3 million by, that's the story.
And we also segregate by country.
Exactly.
Again, the SLTDA, you can find, so many from India, so many from Russia,
so many from UK,
so that's wonderful. I mean, they list every country that you have tourists coming from, but they don't tell us what type of people. Okay, you have 100,000 Indians. Well, who are they? Are they also counting traders? Is it people who are they're coming with the school holidays? Who are they?
See, Niresh, your point is absolutely spot on. See, if you take countries that have developed the tourism industry, what they do is every 3 years they do a usage and attitude study, where they get a global research agency to come in. They analyze the different travelers who are coming, why they came, how they came, how did they get to know, how did they book the destination, how long it took in the purchasing process, and they do that. A classic example is Maldives. I mean, I work in Maldives. We do this whole brand mapping strategy for many of these resorts, and Maldives is a classic example of where they do a UNA study. So though we think everybody comes to Maldives because of the sea, which is not true. When you do the in-depth AI based tracking, you'll find out that from South Korea 80% is honeymooners. Then if you take the Indian market, They come on a Friday and go back on a Sunday, which they come only for recreation. Almost 40% of the Indians come for recreation. Then if you analyze the Japanese, majority of them come because of diving, you know. So you will see the reasons why they come to a country. So that kind of research study Sri Lanka has never done, you know. And I think if you are serious about running any brand, forget tourism, Naresh. I mean, if I'm running a soap brand, I must know why they buy my soap. You know, what is the touch points, what are the communication lines that work, how do they perceive your brand, you know, what is the USP, you know, why would they come back again to your brand, you know.
Well, but now isn't it the role of the government agencies to research exactly that? And when I say government agencies, it's not just Sri Lanka tourism. I'm talking about our universities and so on. Our trade associations as well. Shouldn't they all be, you know, either individually or collectively looking into just this sort of thing? Because today data is everything. And I'm afraid that will be the last question, because we are almost out of time. But how do we set about this research?
See, I would say it's a more policy decision. And when it's policy, it has to be done by the government because it's conclusive. So I would strongly urge that the money that is being collected as cess, you know, where, you know, there is a colossal amount of money, I think 10 billion plus rupees in a typical government agency that drives this particular sector. I would say that you need to allocate some quantum for research to understand why, because the research done by the company that I work for, we have found out that culture is the most driving force. Now, if that is culture, then you must understand what is it. Is it Sigiriya? We know that Sigiriya is one of the most visited sites if you were to go to that cultural triangle. Now, if that is so, have we done a study on carrying capacity study? Now, I was part of a UNDP program. In fact, I led that team where we did the carrying capacity study of Sigiriya, and we looked at all the touch points, where you park your car, you know, how you climb up at the different places in Sigiriya, how many people could be at a given period of time without hurting the rock, because as you very rightly said, sustainability is key. Now, the rock that is Sigiriya is much more stronger than the rock which is nearby, which is Pidurangala, you know. So that kind of study has been done, and that thinking is there, which is again, I think, a diktat that came from all UNESCO heritage sites to be carrying capacity compliant. So my point is, there's some beautiful work done globally on this tourism area. It's a very interesting area that one has to keep yourself abreast to understand the trending things, and you got to pick up those things, and then you got to start asking, how do you make your brand stronger? And I think rural tourism, Naresh, we see Ella beautifully poised to be a absolutely strong rural tourism site, and there's some lovely communities emerging, and given the 9-arch bridge that is there, which is like a it's synonymous in every single place where somebody highlights your country, you'll see somebody taking a photograph there. And I think with that, Ella can be beautifully positioned for as a case study for rural tourism.
Excellent. So a lot of work is going in, and a lot more work has to be done to upgrade and uplift our tourism product, which of course is going to be a driving force in our economic recovery. My thanks to Dr. Rohantha Athukorala, who is of course the Vice Chairman of the World Rural Tourism Council. Thank you very much, Rohantha, for being with us this evening. And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away, because as always, the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.